For the second consecutive year, it came down to a red zone stop. And for the second consecutive year, the Michigan Wolverines get a bull win at the expense of the Alabama Crimson Tide.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
And for the second consecutive year, I was out of my seat. I was in that Jim Harbaugh type of position watching this game, and for the second consecutive year, I became airborne when Michigan ended up making that stop. It brought back great memories to last year's Rose Bowl and semifinal victory for the Michigan Wolverines. This game was a lot like that Ohio State win 13-10 that we saw, where Michigan just felt like they needed to hang on and hang on. They were running the football, taking time off of the clock. Sherrone Moore trusted what Wink Martindale was doing on the defensive side of the football. He trusted that this maize and blue defense was eventually going to make a stop. So speaking of this Alabama win, and speaking of that aforementioned win against the Ohio State Buckeyes on Thanksgiving weekend, you gotta give a big old tip of the cap to Sherrone Moore and this coaching staff with what they were able to do in their final two games of the season, where they were clearly out-talented. They had the other teams that they were playing, the Buckeyes and Crimson Tide in this case, had a lot more athletes. They, even though Michigan certainly has their fair share of NFL players, these were just better football teams in theory, right, than Michigan. But Michigan found a way to go down their path and play the game their way and come up with big-time victories in the last two games of the season. And that's credit to this coaching staff for saying, we know what we got, we know what we have to do, we know the window that this game needs to be played in, and we're going to drag our opponents through that window, and we're going to bully them, stuff them in a locker, and we're going to come out of this certainly with W. So it says a lot about what this Wolverine staff has done, because there was a point in the middle of the season where maybe the Michigan fan base wasn't exactly the biggest fans of what the staff was doing, but finishing the way they did, there is a lot of promise for Michigan, certainly going forward. And, is that the team you wanted over Indiana in the college football playoff? Alabama was a team that at certain times really this season, Kalen DeBoer just didn't have this team ready to play. They came out really flat, certainly in this game. You look back to that Vanderbilt game, right? And there were just instances throughout their three losses that were common threads with Kalen DeBoer and this Alabama team from Tuscaloosa. Oh, by the way, not only is it the second straight win for Michigan over Alabama, it is the second straight postseason win for Michigan over Mr. Kalen DeBoer. Let's get into this thing. And, torrential downpours in Tampa, Florida, certainly steered this game into the way that Michigan wanted to play. It was a nice, friendly assist to get Michigan to play this game in the window and down the path that they certainly wanted to play it. They took advantage with forcing Alabama turnovers and converting with scores, a touchdown and some field goals on those turnovers as well. Here are the first six drives for Alabama. Turnover to downs, a fumble, an interception, a fumble, a punt, and a punt. And just like that, they were ahead 16-0. And that's exactly the type of game that Michigan wants to be in general. We talked about this season that you get Michigan down by 10 points, 14 points, they don't have the offense at all, right, to be able to come back from even that type of deficit. So Michigan wants to play from a position of power. With the personnel on this team this year, they want to play from the lead. They want to keep the ball away from you, and that early barrage of turnovers and said points off of turnovers is what allowed Michigan to play from that position of power really throughout the game. And it really helped out their defense. And we'll talk more about defense certainly here in just a little bit as well. Now, the rain eventually did let up And you might think, okay, now Alabama, they're going to get explosive. Now Ryan Williams, now Jeremy Bernard, they're going to get their feet under them. They're going to be able to go down the field. And there was a point in the game where Alabama was certainly getting some momentum on the offensive side of the football. But big props to the Michigan defense and big props to Wink Martindale. They did not let that continue throughout this entire game. Were there certainly a couple of drives? Yes, but they found a way to maybe bend but don't break in some instances, and other drives they just found a way to break. They just found a way to smash in Alabama on their offensive line, and that's where I really want to talk about this defense, and then we'll eventually talk about the run game because the future is very bright. It is very bright in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Let's talk about this defense. No Will Johnson. He's been injured for most of the year anyway. No Josiah Stewart. No Kenneth Grant. No Mason Graham. All those guys are going to have great careers in the National Football League. Yet Wink Martindale had this defense hungry. They played with their hair on fire, and they came ready to play. They were getting constant pressure on Jalen Milroe and maybe forcing him to make quicker decisions than he expected to. The announcers and the production team at ESPN, and they showed replays of this from the all 22 angles, Michigan was able to get pressure, and there was plays certainly throughout the second half of this game where Jalen Milroe just missed open receivers, and it was due to the pressure that Michigan was able to get, not allowing Jalen Milroe to kind of go through all of his progressions and see some of those guys down the field. Rayshon Benny, TJ Guy, Cameron Brandt. This is going to be a group, I think, that's still going to be really, really good for Michigan in the very near future. Benny and Guy were in that defensive line rotation this season, right? But obviously when you have the NFL caliber players that I mentioned that opted out of this football game, you're not going to get as much time. This was a great opportunity for so many guys on this Michigan football team to show what they can do. This defensive line showed that they are still going to be a great Big Ten defensive line, certainly in the future. When you talk about disrupting Jalen Milroe, 16 of 32, 192 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. That's the type of stat line that Michigan certainly needed to be able to come out with a win, and they did, 19-13 in this game. They also stifled the Alabama run game, 29 carries and 68 yards. So when Milroe doesn't go for over 200, and, Milroe did get some running opportunities in this game, but for the most part, you contain Jalen Milroe and his running ability. That's a recipe. And then, of course, getting that lead early, which I talked about before, that's a recipe for Michigan to come out with the victory. 5 sacks, 6 tackles for loss for Michigan. Derek Moore had 2 sacks. Derek Moore was really the only guy left from this defensive line this season. When you take a look at those 4 players that were on the last play of the Rose Bowl, Stewart, Graham, Grant, and then Derek Moore, he was the only one left. I think Derek Moore, he maybe didn't have as big of a role maybe as some Wolverines expected this season, but I think that he's going to certainly have a bright future ahead of him as well. So that's the defense. There is a lot to be excited about. The Wolverines leaned on this defense. You could kind of tell when Davis Warren went out of this football game that Sherrone Moore probably said to Wink, hey, we're going to need your group to be able to win this game. Alex Orji really doesn't present a passing threat down the field, right? You guys need to come up with stops, and they came up with stops certainly at key times, right? Holding them to a field goal, right, when they went from 10 points to 13 points, and, of course, at the end of the football game as well. Let's talk about the offense. Let's talk about the run game. Michigan fans, you should be very excited about Ohio native Jordan Marshall. There was, high 4-star type of kid. It was his true freshman season this season. And when you have what you have at running back, when you have Donovan Edwards, of course, when you have Kaleo Mullings up there, it's really going to be very hard to get into the rotation, certainly. But we talked about those defensive guys. On the offensive side of the ball, this was the opportunity for Jordan Marshall to see, is he ready for big-time college football? And I think he answered with a yes. He really sparked this offense at times with very timely runs, when your offense is struggling, when you don't have Davis Warren at a quarterback and you have Alex Orji, and we know how limited he is as a passer, you need Jordan Marshall certainly to be able to make big plays. 23 carries, 100 yards. Benjamin Hall was also in this. He's kind of been a piece that's been in this Michigan running back room for a couple of years now. And then you add Alabama transfer Justice Haynes, who was a 5-star all-everything when he came out of high school a couple of years ago. This is a Michigan running back room that is now, I think, reset, and I think it's going to be really, really good going forward. Remember a handful of years back, you had Hassan Haskins and a young Blake Corum. Not saying it's going to be a complete copy and paste with Haynes and Marshall, but you kind of see what ballpark it is certainly within with that. So you got to be really excited about the run game for the Wolverines. You got to be excited about the future of this defense. And we know those are two building blocks that they have built their success on at the University of Michigan. Folks, 8-5. 8-5 with no quarterback essentially and no offense, and wins over Ohio State and Alabama. I think this is the basement. I think that this is as bad as it is going to get for the Michigan Wolverines. Now that Michigan's got their NIL ducks in order, now that they have 100% investment into this program, now that they have a absolute stud in Bryce Underwood as the future of this program at the quarterback position, and they're acquiring talent in the transfer portal, and they're continue to build upon the culture and the foundation that was already laid with Jim Harbaugh. I just don't think it's going to get worse than this. I praised this coaching staff at the beginning. They deserve so much praise to finish the way they did, find ways to win, to be able to play within what their personnel gives them. You got to give them all the credit, certainly in the world. 2024 certainly had some low lows. It had some low lows, and there was a time where there were some questions. Is Michigan going to be able to make a bowl game? But considering what they were able to do, bringing in Bryce Underwood, and what they've been able to do in the portal, and then finishing with wins over Ohio State and Alabama again, this is the ultimate springboard going into 2025, and Michigan has a very favorable schedule in 2025. I'll tell you what, it is a good time to be a Michigan Wolverines. The maize and blue are beaming from ear to ear. Congratulations on the Reliaquest Bowl victory over Alabama for the Michigan Wolverines. Those are my thoughts on this game. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below, and what you maybe think about the future of Michigan football in the comments below. Well, what a great way to ring in the new year with a win over the SEC. I'm Big Ten Ted. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.